thank you all for attending tonight. Appreciate it. As you know, this will be the first meeting for the the review and subsequent approval of the FY 21-22 financial statements for the city of Gladstone, and then also the Gladstone Urban Renewal Agency. First item on your agenda, introductions. I believe we have all been introduced, but I do want to introduce Tanya Moffat formally. She is the managing partner of Morena and Company, our public accounting firm that has been doing our audit now for many, many years. And I am Kathy Brucker, the interim financial consultant here.
I'm Jackie Betts, the city administrator. And Haley, do you want to do a roll call vote? Thank you.
Drusilla Wayland,
Wyland.
I'm sorry.
Here.
Sierra Cook
Present.
and Steve Johnson.
Here.
All right, thank you very much. Next on the agenda is an election of a chairperson. Mr. Johnson is currently the chairperson, but it is only
No, I was not the chairperson. Neil was.
Oh, okay. Right. Well, Mr. Reisner is no longer on the
Right.
committee, so we do need to elect a new chairperson. And it's for a term of 1 year. So the floor is open.
I nominate Sierra Cook.
I'm happy to support in that way. I do not feel confident running a meeting though. So Jackie, if you would support.
Yeah, we'll help you through that.
Thank you.
So we probably need to take a vote. I make a motion that we appoint Sierra Cook as the heck are you? Chairperson of the audit committee. There we go. So then we need discussion and a vote.
Any discussion?
I have none.
All right, let's all those in favor?
I
Aye.
have to call for opposed too.
Oh, anyone opposed? Okay, it sounds like motion carries. Thank you, Tanya. Thank you for the training wheels.
Thank you. All right, so next we'll move into the review of the financial statements. If I could just give a brief explanation on the delay in much of this. Because we do have a joint partnership with NCCWC, North Clackamas Commission, Water Commission, North Clackamas County Water Commission. We had to wait until they had completed their financial statements and their auditing firm, which is a different one from ours, had done everything, issued the statements, everything was good to go. I had received a number when I originally sent out the drafts to you. That was a number that I had received from NCCWC on what our share of the joint partnership was and what the net effect difference would be that had to be reflected in our statements this year. It continued to take quite a while until their audit firm tied everything up and got it submitted. And we had to apply for an extension through January 31st. And basically it was about January 28th or 29th that we received word that their statements had been issued and we could formally issue ours. We cannot jump ahead in any way, shape, or form on that. So sadly, by that time, I was in Alaska on a preset vacation. So Morena and Company and I over notes and Jackie as far as helping us get the information out. And we did file on time with the state. So there is no issue there. But that was the reason the AU 260 letter did not get to you till today. And as I say, there were no number changes whatsoever between what the drafts were and what the finals were. It was just the logistics that we ran into problems with. So we sincerely hope that doesn't happen again, but it's something that's totally outside of our control. With that, I'll turn it over to Tanya to do her presentation on with the review of the financial statements.
Can I ask a quick question?
Of course.
Is there an audit from the North Clackamas County Water Commission?
Oh,
Or is
yeah.
it just a number in here someplace?
There, as far as the audit, the financial statements themselves, you can go on to their website and see. I do receive a copy of the statements. I'll be more than happy to forward them to you if you like. I don't have all their final form, their final submissions that they make to the state, but those would be available from NCCWC, and it's Oak Lodge Water District that does
Right.
the accounting for them. So it should be posted on the Oak Lodge Water site.
At some point, maybe during your presentation, can you point us to where that number is in the report?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks.
That's really
Yeah.
easy.
Tanya, make
Yes.
sure your microphone.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, thank you. I'm used to some of these, everybody's is different. Some you have to push the button. So again, Tanya Moffett with Marina and Company. And so we are the city's external auditors. So we come in and we take a look at the books. We look at some compliance stuff as well on an annual basis to make sure that the city is in compliance with some specific things as well. So like Kathy explained, the draft financial statements that we all had back in December, basically, they didn't change, but we weren't sure. So we couldn't issue because we were waiting on basically that one number from them to know if it was correct. But we had finished our review. Kathy had done everything. So we were just waiting. It was a waiting game for all of us. So apologize for getting these out so late, but we had to not issue our reports because if something changed or there was something that needed to flow through onto the city's financial statements that we would incorporate that in there. And there wasn't anything luckily, but just in case, you never know. So there are 2 letters that you received today that are different than that you hadn't seen before. And what those are called is AUC 260 reports, or their reports to those charged with governance. And essentially it's a letter from us as the auditors explaining like how the audit went, but I'm verbally going to go through the key points on those letters. So Mr. Johnson, if you haven't had a chance to look at it, I apologize, but we literally just got this off the door via email. Basically, we were tag teaming, trying to get it out. So for the city's financial statement, so that's on the top, the first letter that's there. For the city of Gladstone, we issued an unmodified or clean opinion on the date on the letter is January 26th. Our opinion is limited to the basic financial statements as well as the budget to actual statements, which some are in the required supplementary section and some are in the supplementary information. We applied limited procedures to like the management discussion and analysis. So we read it, we make sure that it makes sense, but we didn't actually audit that piece of it, as well as a few of the statements that are in the required supplementary information that have to do with the OPEB and the pension, because they're 10-year statements, but we do audit the numbers that are in the financial statements that go with those. And the introductory section, we don't audit that piece as well. But for the most part, most of the stuff that's in there is audited by us. But I would recommend the one thing that I like the most out of any government financial statement, if they have it, is the management discussion and analysis. And the reason why, even though it's not audited, don't tell anybody. But it's my favorite part because it shows comparative information. So it has last year's information and the current year's information, and then it talks about some of those differences and changes. And so I think it's a really good snapshot of where the city's at. And so that's why I like to point readers of the financial statements to the management discussion and analysis, because it explains, okay, this went up, this went down, and why. It's not just, okay, up, down, but it explains why as well. It also talks a little bit about the debt and the capital assets. So the, buildings and that kind of stuff is also in there. So it's a good snapshot. And because some of the notes, I will be honest, are even hard for us to understand sometimes. So we have some rules around pension, like the pension liability and things like that, that, I mean, I think there's what, 5 or 6 pages of just notes on that. And it's, a lot of it has to do with what the bonding rate agencies want to hear, but it's, you know, it's hard for, you know, if you're having insomnia and you need something to read, I say pull out your financial statements and read the pension and the other post-employment benefits section, the OPEB section. But that's basically that. When we did our audit, we didn't have any restrictions placed on it. So when we asked for information, we had full access to anything that we asked for. We received it in a timely manner. We didn't have any significant difficulties when we did the audit. There were no disagreements with management, and there was no like policies that don't have authoritative guidance. So sometimes we'll see entities that have something that's really strange. The city of Gladstone stuff is cookie cutter. I mean, as far as there is authoritative guidance from the Government Accounting Standards Board. There are some estimates in the financial statements, which mean that it's something that is not a like hard number. So a good example is depreciation. So like, I'm going to pick on the police, but it's not because I don't like the police. It's just, it's an easy example. Like a police car. We don't know how long a police car is going to last. It might be 10 years. It might be a week because we don't know what's going to happen. So we assign a number of years to it, and then we do what's called depreciation, and we just write it down, you know, to basically say, okay, we're not going to use it as much, or it's going to eventually go away. So depreciation is one of the larger estimates in the financial statement. And then compensated absences payable. So we don't know when employees are going to take their vacations. So the number that's in the financial statements is based off of their pay rate as of June 30, 2022. So if they got a raise in July of 2022, then it would be paid out a little bit higher rate. So it's based off of what their pay rate was right then. And then the largest estimate in the financial statements is the net pension liability. The one good thing about the net pension liability is that the city doesn't come up with that number. The actuaries come up with the number. So they have a way of calculating it. So even though it's an estimate, there is like rules and procedures applied to get that number. And that number comes from the Oregon State, and they disperse it to all of the entities that are a part of Oregon PERS. So even though it is an estimate, it's one of those things that is covered by that. And then the other post-employment benefits is also another one. So what that is it's the difference between what the city pays for health insurance and what potential benefits somebody might have when they're retired. So that difference between when they might get those benefits. So those are the primary estimates. And then there were no material misstatements in the financial statements. And occasionally management may decide to consult with other accountants or auditing firms in other matters. The only person that we're aware of is Kathy, because she's your consultant, but in a management capacity here. But besides that, we aren't aware of any of that. If you look at the financial statements for the city, starting on page 84, I believe. Sorry. I've gotten to where I don't print out the financial statements anymore because I'm so much faster looking at them online.
Yeah, 84 is audit comments and disclosures.
Okay, perfect. Yep. So thank you for the help there. So page 84, the Oregon State Legislature has some very specific things that they ask municipal auditors in Oregon State to look at to make sure that Oregon municipalities are in compliance with. So a good example is ORS 279, that's public purchasing. So like when the city went to build the building, you have to go out for bid and make sure that everybody has an opportunity to bid on the job. So we look to make sure that when the city does projects like that, that they go through the proper channels so that they're being posted in the newspaper, so that everybody has an opportunity, that it's a fair process. So that doesn't really have anything to do with numbers. It's more a compliance thing to make sure that they're in compliance with the laws and regulations. Same with like highway funds. So the city receives street and highway funds. So we look to make sure that those street and highway funds are spent for what they're appropriated for. Investments, collateralization. So some of them do deal with numbers, but it's really more about compliance because it's not something that you would necessarily as an auditor normally dig into. But the Oregon State legislature has determined that these are some very specific things that they want us to look at. So we went in and we looked at these things and we didn't have any findings in any of those areas for the city or for the urban renewal. And on the urban renewal, it's located on page 21. I just like to point that out because it's something that's very unique to Oregon, but it's also important because it shows that the city's in compliance with those things as well. So for the urban renewal agency, we also had a clean or an unmodified opinion. You guys aren't one that I have to close the meeting and do a different one, right? I don't think so.
We have got that, no.
Okay.
It's all combined.
No, the council does when they do it, but we don't
Okay.
have to. Yeah.
I was trying to remember. Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson.
Yes, no, we're good.
Like, because sometimes they're separate. So I just needed to make sure that we didn't need to close and open another one. So the Urban Renewal Agency, what the Urban Renewal Agency is, it's included in the city's financial statements as a blended component unit. But because the way that they're identified, it's identified as a separate government entity because they are only in existence for a short period of time typically, and then they'll eventually close. So they have their own set of financial statements. So the urban renewal financial statements flow into the city's financial statements so you can see them in both places. And we had a clean opinion on the urban renewal agency as well. And like I said, the report for the Oregon minimum standards that the legislature has identified is on page 21 for them. So, okay. And then back to your question about the, thank you.
NCCWC.
And my guess is that we'll have to have 2 votes at the end of this for urban renewal and for regular, but we don't have to close the meeting, go back and forth, but there'll be 2 votes. Yeah.
So to answer your question, Mr. Johnson, on page 13 of the city's financial statements. No, you're fine.
Got it.
It is so at the very top of the page, it's got assets, it has current assets. The next one that's kind of subcategory is non-current assets. Under non-current assets, it's the 3rd line item down, investment in joint venture. And then it's $3,126,044.
Here.
And then on the statement of activity, so that is the balance sheet amount, essentially, the asset part. The change from last year's amount of your investment in the joint venture to the change from this to this year is on page 15. And you kind of have to put 14 and 15 next to each other. If it was bound, you would see that. Sorry. So 14 and 15 together. It is, if you go up from the bottom on this one, there's like the net position, general revenues. Above that is transfers. It kind of goes over to the left a little bit. The 4th item up, there's a gain or loss in joint venture. I'm gonna wait till everybody gets there. Oh, no, you're fine.
I'm lost. Sorry.
Okay. Here, can I come up there and help you? You're welcome. Okay, so that number is 46,000. And what that is again, that is the change between what the value was or your investment in it last year and the investment this year. So that's a positive change of 46,000. And then lastly, it is also included on page 34 of the notes. that explains what the investment in the joint venture is for. Pulling those pages for me.
Section M, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, note M.
We were waiting for that little tiny piece.
Yes.
It was a good one.
If they didn't get it to us on time? They didn't give it to us on time. We have to file for an extension.
Mhm,
Yes, yes,
mhm.
if they had not gotten it by that time. And when you're waiting on other governments in that sense, the state auditor's office, needless to say, is very understanding of it. And worst came to worst, we would make an estimate and we would be able to find, get confirmation from the auditors that it was a good estimate, and then go forward and close out our year and make any type of adjustment in the following year. But we were able to slide it in time there.
Yeah, it's best practices to have the actual number because you
Yes.
just don't know if the auditors are going to find something or if there's a reason that they're not issuing the report.
Mhm.
So best practices is to wait until the joint venture is, but there is alternatives like Kathy explained where you can do an estimate, like City of Portland estimates like, I don't know, probably about 30% of the numbers on their financial statements, but they also get them out really, really early. So they do it, I think they close within 90 days.
Mhm.
And have their financial statements out really fast, but it means that they're not as accurate. I mean, there's trade-offs. You get the information earlier, but it's not as accurate.
Is there some kind of number that if it's way off from the estimate, that you don't wait till we do this again next year and you explain to us why the change and we had to make an adjustment? Is there?
Well, fortunately, we have very few estimates, and the estimates that are in there that are of significant value are developed by other sources, such as Tanya was talking about with the net pension liability and the OPEB liabilities. Those are developed by our actuaries, either with PERS or with CIS through our insurance. We have no input on those. We're told what to put on there. They do a very, very good job. They know what they're doing. And so they're an estimate that is developed off of as all known facts possibly available at that time. If that makes it all understandable. As far as other estimates that we have in there, capital assets, those types of things, depreciation being an estimate there. Yes, if there was something that was way off, significantly off, I imagine we could do a notification to you of it. But fortunately, we've not had any issues such as that.
It's very
Yes.
uncommon that you would have something like that. If there was something like purely hypothetical, this did not happen for the record. If the joint venture came back in 3 months and said this number's wrong, and it was off a lot, that we're like, it's gonna change somebody's opinion about the financial statements. Let's say it needs to be moved down significantly. Then we could have the option of going back and reissuing the financial statements. And what it's called is our auditor's report would have what's called a dual date on it. So we'd say everything is correct as of the January 26th date, except for the joint venture number. And this changed or whatever it is, or the estimate for depreciation, whatever it is. Again, for the record, that did not happen. That was just a hypothetical, what we can do as to do.
Well,
it.
I just wondered, like, it's 46,000 and so they change it to 48,000.
That
No,
doesn't matter.
but they change it to 100,000, then we'd have to,
Even 100,000
Really?
probably wouldn't be material to the city. So, but if it was like 1 million, yes, that's a significant
Yes.
number.
well, that's
Um,
what I wondered, how big the number would have to be before we'd have to.
So yeah, we have a way as auditors that we calculate what we call material material balances essentially. And then we also take that number and we get what's called a tolerable misstatement. So if we know something's wrong, we have this threshold. It's kind of like, you know, hot water, right? Like is it warm? Is it hot? Like once it gets to boiling, then we have to make a change, right? And so we have that skill. And again, if it got to that point where it was boiling, then we would maybe have to do something about it. But if it's below that, then we can always do something else. We have alternatives.
I do think it's important for you guys to know that there were some very uncomfortable conversations with management because we pride ourselves on having our information done in a timely manner. And the city was ready to go in December, but we're at the mercy of them. And we continue to try to improve that. But there were some difficult conversations to apply pressure to them.
Thank you for all your work getting it done.
Yeah, and that is appreciated. I feel a little rushed, you know, at this point. I'm confident that we're okay, but yeah, end of December, beginning of January would have been a better time to have that. So hopefully Oak Lodge / NCCWC will get their act together for next year.
What is the hard deadline? I mean, do you keep filing extensions indefinitely?
We don't.
We have not had to
Yeah,
deal with
we
that
don't.
in all
There-
my years.
So let's just put it this way. There is about, I want to say 30, I think it was 38 last that I heard, entities that had not filed for last year, their June 30, 2021 audits. And so if it's a city or a county, they start losing some of their state funding to try to get them to become in compliance. But let's be honest, it's not usually a money situation. It's like a personnel situation or something along those lines. So the state starts trying to do things to encourage entities to become in compliance, but there's really not a ton that they can do. They get on a list that goes to the legislature, so then the legislature knows. They have a harder time getting financing. So if they want to go to the bank and get a loan or they want to do a bond, they'll have a harder time doing that. As well as like there's some other things that could potentially be impacted. Sometimes their insurance companies will drop them because they don't have their financial statements, so they're a higher risk. So the drop dead deadline is technically December 31st of 2022. So then you can apply for an extension. Usually the state does not grant extensions very long out because they want you to be in compliance. There's a reason that December 31st is the deadline. So, but like I said, the legislature does pay attention to it, and they do have the Secretary of State do a list of everybody that went on extension, everybody that filed late that didn't get an extension, and everybody that hasn't filed yet. So they're aware. They might not get grant funding if they don't do it, but there's not a whole lot of things that can happen.
Yeah, it's like a lot of government things like taxes. As long as you haven't fallen off the face of the earth and disappeared, and you're keeping some communication with, you know, those agencies, they're not sending the paddy wagon out. You know, they just want to know what's going on more than anything. A year, yeah, you know, you might start to see blue and red lights, but a month or two probably is not the end of the year, end of the world, be my guess.
I've known entities that haven't done it for several years and that
Yeah.
doesn't
So have
happen.
I.
Yeah, it still doesn't happen. Okay.
So,
Yeah.
yes.
Comes a point, at least in business, you start to wonder if those are viable entities or not. So,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah. Does anybody have any specific questions on like what we do when we do the audit, on the numbers, how, anything like that that you want me to explain?
Yeah,
Anything
I came with some questions based on the
Perfect.
reporting provided.
Yes,
yeah.
But I also is there going to be a presentation? Was that the presentation?
That was the
You're
presentation.
not, okay, cool, great.
Because it just depends. Some people
Yeah.
like very specific things, other people don't. So yeah.
Right. Okay, cool. Yeah, there were just a few things that kind of stuck out to me that I'm hoping for clarification on. One was just kind of a general question. So a large portion of the city of Gladstone assets are capital assets. They're not liquid. I'm not, is there a professional opinion that anyone has for if there's a ratio or any other measure of what a safe level of unrestricted assets would be for a city? Is there a rule of thumb? Is there a ratio? Is there any kind of metric to get an understanding of what feels comfortable for the city?
You want me to try to answer that?
Yes,
Oh, so no, there is not a standardized metric. And with two of the new, so government financial statements that are based off of government accounting standards. So the Government Accounting Standard Board sets the rules. A few years ago, I believe it was 7 now, GASB 68, which is the pension standard, came out. And what happened with the pension standard is it made this huge liability go on the books for government. So if you look at in the city's financial statements, if you look at page 13, about midway down in the middle, there's liabilities, and then there's current liabilities, and then there's non-current liabilities. The next item on the list is the net pension liability. Is everybody following me? Okay, I just want to make sure that anybody lost. Okay. So the net pension liability for the city is $4,715,000. So what that did is when that liability went on the books, it took all of that unrestricted net position or equity, net income, whatever you want to call it. For governments, we call it net position. It's the same thing because it's basically the assets. And then in government, we have this strange thing called deferred in or outflows of resources. So basically you're taking your assets and deferred outflows of resources, and then you're subtracting out your liabilities and then your deferred inflows of resources. And then you get your net position. So that's like your working capital per se. So what you have to be able to spend. The thing is that in that is that net pension liability estimate that's in there. So you can't really go look at that unrestricted number. So if you look at the bottom of the page, there's the net position, and then we've got the net investment in capital assets, and then we've got the restrictions, and then we have the unrestricted amount. Well, it's negative for the governmental funds. It's positive for the business type activity, but you have to remember that there's $4 million that's in this liability that is somewhere in the future, like way in the future. And so that is technically still a liquid asset, right? Like you don't have to pay it now, because as long as the city's making the current required contributions, you're theoretically covering that liability in the future, because they recalibrate how much you have to pay per employee every 2 years. And so there's not really a metric specifically off of that, because there's all those different things that are in there.
Mhm.
and if I could add one thing also, I had on the email that I sent out to all of you on December 28th with the draft financial statements, I brought that to your attention on the negative unrestricted within the general governmental activities, because this was a first for the city to have that negative in there. And it's, as Tanya said, with the presentation that we have to make with this and these two initial statements here, basically we had gone out and borrowed $5 million in order to build the public works building.
Mhm.
That, of course, is a liability immediately put on our books. However, once the public works building is built, that will be offset by the capital asset. So we not only, as Tanya's saying, the net pension liability and the net OPEB liabilities, but because we're showing we have indebted ourselves for that 5 million, but yet at this point in time, we have not offset the investment in net capital assets to counterbalance that. So next year, you'll see it swing the other way. But because that was very unusual for the city, that was why I wanted to try and bring your attention to it and explain it to you at that time.
So one of the things that I always look at when I'm looking at an entity to see kind of how they're doing, one of the things that I look at is the statement of activities. So that's the next couple pages. So that's the 14 and 15
Mhm.
pages. So the statement of activity has down towards the bottom on page, the numbers are on page 15, the descriptions on the left on the page 14. Up about 5 lines up, there's change in net position.
Mhm.
So those numbers, typically you want to see them positive or close to 0. We do have a negative number, like Kathy just explained, for the governmental funds. It's okay to have a negative number if there's a reason for why you're having a negative number. Or if you're trying to, you're building new infrastructure, things like that, that's when you would see that number be negative, because you want to make sure that you're able to cover it. So that's one of the things that I look at. The other thing that I look at is cash flow. So, and those numbers are not necessarily in the financial statements, but how much liquid cash does the city have to cover their expenses on a monthly basis? And as long as they have enough cash to be able to cover the expenses, then that's a positive indicator as well for an entity or a governmental entity, because they're not for profit. So like when you think about a business, you have all those assets and you can go out and sell them. For a government, they can't sell them. I mean, think about some of the assets that the city has, like a bridge. Like you can't go sell, there's no market to go sell a bridge to somebody, right? So you have it, but there's also not a market for it. So it's not as important as some of the other numbers on the financial statement. So
Yeah.
usually I look at like, okay, has cash and investments changed? And if it did, why? Is there a reason why it changed? So again, that goes back to me saying that I like the management discussion and analysis, because it explains where those changes are, and they're at that higher level because they're those groups of things. So
Mhm.
it's just a personal thing. The other thing that I like to look at is the budget to actual statements. What did we estimate we were going to spend, and what did we actually spend? What did we estimate we were going to get for revenue or resources, and what did we actually get? Were we way off? Were we close? Those are, so the budget to actual statements, which I know there's a ton in there, but just by looking at those, let's pull up let me find one just so that we can have an example. So give me just a second to get a page number. Let's do our friends, the police. So let's pick page 64.
And this is the special levy fund,
Oh,
police communication special levy fund.
okay. Let's actually pick the one before that. I didn't realize that it was a levy fund. Let's pick page 63. Sorry.
For
Let's
the
do the road and street fund.
Yeah.
So basically what we have here is we have 4 columns on the financial statement. So we have the original, and then we have the final budget, or if there has been any changes. Since the city has a biennium budget, and these financial statements are for the first year, I'm going to anticipate that those variances are going to be higher. Now, next year, it's going to be lower, but a typical rule of thumb with a biennium, unless it's like capital projects, so like a asset that you're getting, typically it's usually you're expecting to spend about 50% of it. Just rule of thumb, there's always exceptions to that. But if you go and you look, okay, so public service taxes, they expected to have 2.1 million. For the first year, they got 1.2 million. So we're a little bit over half. So that's good. That's positive, because we still have a whole nother year to collect more public service taxes. So that's kind of what I do, is I go through and look at them. Now, if I go down to the expenditures and I'm looking at personnel services, okay? So personnel services is like employee wages, employee benefits, things like that. So they were anticipating $1 million. Well, they've only spent 418. okay, that's positive. They haven't spent, now if those numbers were flipped and they had spent 600,000 and we only had 400,000 left, then I'd be a little bit more concerned. So that's kind of what I do is I go and look at the budget to actual statements and say, okay, are we kind of where we anticipate that we should be? So those are a good indicator too, of how healthy and how where that the city is spending the money in the way that the budget committee and the council has appropriated it.
Super helpful.
It's probably more information than you wanted to know.
No, it's okay. I
but, like,
love it. I would have loved an easy, like, oh, here's Morgan's ratio of what this is, but it makes sense that it's not as cut and dried as that. I'm actually glad you brought up the Public Works building because my next question was about Public Works.
I have a question, and maybe it's just something I don't understand, but it's been 40 years since I took nonprofit accounting. I sort of forgotten that. You borrow $5 million to build a new building. So at the end of the year, do you not, okay, so the bank doesn't just give us $5 million? Do we wait until we need it to
Oh,
pay?
no, that's a very good point you're bringing up. They give us we borrow the 5 million. It goes on as a liability because we're legally obligated, of course, to pay it back. The cash is in.
So
our
we do
act-
have the cash.
We do.
So
have the
then, and
cash.
it's on 1 year.
Yeah.
So let's say that we got it at the sort of the end of the year and then they start building the building the next
Mhm.
year. So and if the building takes 2 years to build, so do you value the building
Yes.
at the end of the first year? And
We value what we have spent by the end of the first year. So if you borrow 5 million and you have recorded 2.5 million.
so
of
that's what we
that
consider
as an expenditure, that would be valued. Where it's a
Page
little
39
unusual.
Is capital assets.
Yes,
39.
there, but what I wanted to point out was that because that 1.9 million deficit that we had in governmental, in that section, as far as the assets of the governmental activities, we have to negate our unrestricted by the 5 million that is a liability, that is the money that we owe, but we don't get the positive offset from the construction of the building yet because it hadn't even started.
right.
So we had the negative, but we didn't have the positive in that restricted asset or in a net position area.
So we have,
That's
if it
what
costs
created-
the next year, we've spent 2.5 million, then does that go into a capital that's the value of the building?
It
and
will
then-
go into the capital asset section
Okay.
up above. The cash will be depleted. The capital asset will
well,
be
there.
offset
Okay.
in that asset section.
Makes
And then
perfect
down
sense.
below in the net position area, we will still be carrying the liability of what is still
Still.
outstanding and what we owe. But the investment in capital net assets will be increased by how much that building has cost.
Cost it.
So it was a very unusual timing issue that happened this year with that. Then the other thing that I'd like to point out too is kind of going back to what Tanya was saying about the 170,000 deficit that it showed in the statement of activities for the governmental funds. Again, part of that is recovering from the pandemic. We did have some sharply reduced revenues. And in the 2021 year, we started recovering. 21, 22, we almost fully recovered. But there's still some lagging effect from that. You may have seen in the paper or heard through the council meetings that we received 2.7 million in the American Rescue Plan funding. The only amount that we are showing on as a revenue, as a grant revenue in this year is what we have actually expended out of those grant revenues. So if you look again back on page 13, you will see,
Isn't it 14?
no, 13.
Sorry.
Yeah, here, you will see in here that there is an non-current, excuse me, where we got, it's an outflow right here. Under deferred inflows of resources, there is deferred inflow related to grant funds. And that shows a dollar amount of the 1.3 million ARPA funds that have not been expended. So those are sitting basically as a type of liability. We have the money, the cash is in the bank, but yet we have to offset it until it is actually expended. So there's a lot of little funny things that this first statement actually deals with a little bit differently than our traditional balance sheet.
Mhm.
Yes.
Governments have some very weird roles.
Basically, what's odd for us is we have three different sets of books. We have the statement of net activities and the statement of net position that is more a business focus, a long-term business focus. Then we have our budgetary statements, which Tanya was referring to, which tell a really good story of the city. And then we have our gap statements that are the dictated by the accounting standards. So it's a challenge.
Well, I know this is probably a really silly question, but does it mention in here, and I didn't read the whole thing, about COVID? Because
Yes.
what I was wondering is if somebody decided to do a study on it in 50 years and they went back and looked at how it affected
Mhm.
small companies.
Yes. If you-
Would they mention and notice that, if they'd missed
Well-
that we had a pandemic, would they?
I'm sure they would, and there's been a lot of studies done on it, a lot of surveys gone out as far as how have they affected us, et cetera, et cetera. And in the management discussion and analysis, it is discussed. It was
Okay.
last year extensively. This year, I, have further elaborated on it because of course it is still very applicable to
Yeah.
this year. And so under economic factors in next year's budget, there's certain places, and even in the notes to the financial
Okay.
statement, it is also mentioned sporadically through there.
I studied genealogy. I just wondered if, when people
Yeah.
go back and look at things, would it be there?
Yeah, it's very much a topic that you'll see, I believe, in most anybody's financial statements these last couple of years.
Oh, go ahead, Steve.
Question. I'm sorry, did I
No,
interrupt you?
no, you got it. Go
Okay.
for it. Yeah.
I remember many years ago asking what I guess was a dumb question. And that was, how much money does the city have at any one time? And I got about as many different answers as people asked. I finally stopped asking. I work in a cash-based business. So I mean, if I can go to the bank and say, this is how much money I got, throw in some receivables and a few payables and voila, you've got a cash flow. But it was almost like it's impossible to find that number here. And you said something about free cash flow or something like that. Is there a way of
Is there-
quantifying that now?
Is there
As
cash flow
far
statement?
as under assets, you'll see our current assets listed on page 13.
Mhm.
At the very top, it
Mhm.
says cash and investments. That is money in the bank and our local government investment pool. That is cash and investments. Cash with county treasurer is property tax money that's in transit that last month of the year. And that's basically our cash.
Okay.
That is our cash. And, what do
And
you?
restricted.
Oh, thank you very much. And then under non-current assets, we've got the restricted cash and investments. So that is cash, but as cash is designated for a specific purpose, such as the SDCs, it's money that came in from a restricted source.
Like the ARPA funds are in there
Yes,
as well,
yes.
just because it's grant
Mhm.
funds that you can't spend right now.
So at the end of the biennium, on June 30th or July 1st or whatnot, is there a place somewhere in the budget where it says this was the carryover? This is how much money came out
Yes,
of the
but-
last biennium and is now coming into the new biennium?
But remember, we can only estimate the year end. Like right now, I'm in the process of estimating the year end for 22, 23. So in preparation of the budget that will go to the budget committee here in May, I will be estimating what I think we will have in cash as of June 30th. So it is an estimate. I have a hard number to start the 22-23 beginning balance, because I have this hard number right here, a firm number. But again, I'll be doing an estimate by the end of this year to start the new biennium with. So there is timing.
I finally have an answer.
So I
For all
was,
these years.
I was gonna say, there is a, like Kathy said, this is the balance as of those two numbers, the cash and investments and the restricted cash and investments. That is the amount of cash and investments at June 30. But just like your bank account with your business, when you go out and spend the next day, then it goes down. So that's constantly fluctuating and in flux. And like when the city got the proceeds for the new building, that also made it increase dramatically. And so it just depends on the date. There is a way, if you really wanted to see what the number was as of July 1st, 2022, I can show you how to do the calculation, but it's not one number in the financial statements. It's the governmental is really easy to find because the governmental number is, I can tell you where that one is at right now.
And then also on page 36, the note 2 of cash and investments gives you a little bit more explanation there too.
So
And talks about.
There, June 30th even. All right.
yeah, and then on the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance for governmental funds, it's on page 19 and 20. And again, these are ones that you're gonna have to put next to each other. So there's a fund balance ending. It's the very bottom number on those two statements. And then if you go to the far right column on page 20, it's 16,219,449. That is basically the cash balance that would roll forward to July 1st for the governmental funds for 2022.
Mhm.
The number right above that, the 11,256,000, that was the balance that was there as of July 1st, 2021, the year before. The reason that I say it's a little bit tricky is because the business type activities are on a different basis. They're on the full accrual basis. So that number, you have to go and add up a couple numbers to get it. So that's where you get the governmental fund number. That one's an easy one for me to point out where it's at. The business type ones, I can show you how to do that calculation from the financial statements if you want me to go through the process. It's not that hard. It's just that it's not one number that I can just point to really easily.
It's okay. None of these numbers have parentheses around them, so I think we're okay.
That's always positive. Yes, exactly. So.
Yes, very true. Thank you for noticing. that.
And we do get monthly statements on the government investment pool that come to me, and then I look at them, and then they go to Kathy.
Does,
thank you.
I know nowadays interest isn't much, but do we earn interest on that
Oh,
5
yes.
million?
We do. We're earning interest on the 5 million because it is invested in the local government investment pool. That is a investment fund that is run by the state. There are caps as far as how much a entity can invest in there, and it's in the 50 million range now. So
It's
we,
54 million.
we're well under the cap amount, but it pays one of the best interest rates out there right now. It's a huge fund, all sorts of mixes of types of investment products within there. It is 100%, well, at least 99.9% secure for us. It's liquid, which is wonderful. We can deposit monies and withdraw monies within
Whenever.
24 hours, basically. So it is the preferred method. Any entity, most any city or governmental entity will invest up to that maximum cap that is available and then go outside of.
So it
that.
doesn't just go to our bank or a money market account or something like that. It
No,
goes
there
into
it
the
would,
state.
yes, you would see nothing
account.
in return, basically.
Well-
It's currently at over 3%
I
right
think
now.
right now, yeah.
And they adjust to the market very quickly. That's another good thing.
The best part about it is that it's liquid. So
Mhm.
it's not like a CD or
Yeah.
something like that, or something that's a little bit harder to get the money back out when it's invested. So that's the best part about the LGIP, is because it's such a large pool, because basically all governments that are eligible to participate in it pretty much do. Like she said, it's the premier, like the method that most people go about using it. And so because it's so large, that's why it can be liquidated really
Mhm.
quickly. And then the state treasurer is the one that administers that program, and there's very specific rules about what they can
Mhm.
invest in and things like that. We really haven't seen problems with it. There was some problems about 18 years ago
Mhm.
when the Lehman Brothers, or was
Oh,
it? Yeah, like
yes,
that was the
yes.
last time that I remember them having
Yes.
any like a significant chunk that was like
And that
bad, but that was
also too,
everybody.
then when laws tightened up as far as the mechanisms that could be used with that, invested from there. So it's been, it's a godsend.
Yeah.
It absolutely is
What's
for
the name of that investment tool?
local government investment pool.
Mhm.
It's referred to as LGIP, state LGIP, or LGIP for short. And most every single state, at least all states that I've worked in, has always had this type of mechanism available for local governments and counties. If you are a governmental entity of any type or level within the state. And then, of course, the state's heavily invested in it also.
Nice.
Page 36 shows like
Mhm.
what the name of it is, and as well as like how much was invested in it as of June 30, 2022.
Cool.
I have another question.
Go for it. Yeah, please.
Along the lines of banking, we talked last year about the checking account. That's with US Bank, right? Was there any attempt made to try to get a bank into Gladstone? Get them to open a branch? I know I brought that up. I'm being
Yeah.
redundant, but it would be nice if the city would use its financial strength to have somebody open a bank branch in Gladstone.
Well, one of the, what we did this year was a request for proposals posted to the Oregon Buys website and other websites that we need to use to solicit a proposal from a bank within Gladstone or we had to go, actually, Mr. Johnson, to a 4-mile limit outside of Gladstone within that 4 miles. Because at this point in time, there were no banks large enough left in Gladstone to be able to utilize and put our business into. Again, going back to the state, any bank that we deal with has to be on the Oregon Depository approved list. And there wasn't, US Bank had closed their Gladstone branch. And whatever other bank may have been here was not available for our depository and, use as a depository. The good thing about it was that US Bank came back with a very good proposal for us to continue our relationship with them. They were the only bank that responded. There was no credit union, no other bank responded as far as interest in our funds. Why, I really can't tell you. It was not a situation where I was going to call up and say, why didn't you, why were you not paying attention to us? All of this information went out. And all I can assume is that they either felt that the cost of it would not offset what our deposits would be. But we do have significant deposits. I mean, was very surprised we didn't receive more feedback on that. We do have a very small CD with one of the local credit unions. But other than that, because of the availability of state LGIP and then what US Bank is able to provide us for service, we have not varied out any.
No,
Yeah.
maybe that will change. I'm glad you tried.
Is that bank still empty? Is that building still just?
The auto dealer, the US Bank.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I guess I haven't noticed.
It's another auto dealer.
But
So
I had the US Bank tell me I had some, because I complained, because I'm an old person and our bank up here closed the day that they announced COVID, they closed their drive-through.
Mhm.
Made a lot of sense. And I talked to a young man at the one in on 82nd, the US Bank on 82nd, and he actually told me, I wanted to slap his face. Well, old people are just going to have to get used to using the computer
Oh,
and their phone.
dear.
I mean,
Yeah.
he said that to me because I said, well, there's lots of people who, I didn't have a cell phone at the time. And well, old people are just going to have to get used to it because they're trying to close the banks down. They don't want to have to deal with people and
I have to laugh because you and I have had similar experiences. Yes, I've had that conversation.
same conversation.
Similar conversation, yes.
And I'll tell you, I know this doesn't have anything to do with the audit, but with the bookkeeping clients I have, now that people just deposit on their phones,
Mhm.
where's those checks you wrote? They're sitting in somebody's file. I mean, because I have some of those files that have
Or
people's checks sitting there.
shredded.
I also know that that sometimes when they go to cash their checks that we've written them, they don't ever go through our bank account.
Mhm.
And this is a US bank.
Mm.
And they don't go through our bank account. It just,
Mhm.
I guess I won't be around when when it all goes down. No.
Well, we're utilizing the branch on Highway 99, just across the Gladstone border there. And it's, I can't tell you exactly where it is. It's,
The one in Oregon City.
no, it wouldn't be
No.
Oregon City. It would be more towards Milwaukee.
Oak Grove.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
Oh, the Oak Grove one.
Yes.
Okay, yes.
yeah, so it's very close for us.
Yes, I
But
use
as I
that too.
say, I had to do a Google map and try to determine what was available within Gladstone city limits. And then I started spreading out.
That's the one that,
Yeah.
that's the one that closed their drive-through the day of COVID. They closed COVID down.
Oh,
Mhm.
But I also think it gave US Bank an opportunity to look at the services they provided us, and they reduced some fees and restructured some of the services that they provide us with a credit. So they didn't want to lose us. They didn't know that nobody else wasn't going to respond, but I think our partnership with them now is
It's
better.
improved, yes.
Yes.
It's much improved. The earnings credit, we get an earnings credit on our deposits. It's calculated basically on a daily basis. We're able to use, and they increased our earnings credit
Well,
significantly.
that's good to know.
So we were able to offset our fees by that. And then they also gave us some continuing customer credits that we're still trying to figure out exactly how we want to use them, but we'll be doing that also. So certainly it wasn't futile that we did this.
Mhm.
It really was a benefit to the city. Yeah.
So we use US Bank for banking services. For
Mhm.
investment, we use
LCHIP?
legit. You mentioned that there's a maximum on investments there. We're well within that
Oh,
maximum?
yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yes,
I think it's 45 million or
It- it
54 million, I'm
increases,
sorry.
yes,
and
it
you guys have
increases every year.
27 million in there, so
Yes.
you.
Okay.
So, yeah, we're-
For
we're in
now,
good shape.
in a few years,
okay.
we'll have to reassess, I'm sure.
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
I had a question about, in the AU letter, there was a mention of known and likely misstatements of 21,000,
yes, yeah.
which in a large budget, like 21,000, but I was curious, was that one instance of 21,000? Was that 21,000 instances of $1? Like, is there a general?
Basically what that is on our utility billing, we bill through on June 30th, when we send bills, it is for revenue through June 30th.
Mhm.
This portion here is what was billed out in July for consumption that was technically used in June. So they have this small balance that basically they're carrying out, the auditors will look at. If they saw that it was starting to creep up, if it was starting to get excessive, something like that, then we would make the adjustment for it. But basically, I have 12 months of base revenue and 12 months of consumption revenue in every single year.
Mhm.
If there was an adjustment that was made, it would be about $3,000. Because last year it was $18,000 that they said was captured in the following year.
Mhm.
This year it's 21,000. So it would only be that net difference. Personally, as far as in my area, in my experience here, something so small such as that, it's a pass, and they have agreed with me on that.
Great.
So rather than do these, they like to do that calculation, but personally, I don't want to do it. I provide them the information, they do it, because it is such an absolute immaterial number.
But like Abby
Yes.
said, there's 12 months
Months,
in there. And so
yes.
that's why if there was ever an adjustment, like it would change there'd be like what's called a prior period adjustment. And then that difference would only be about $2,000,
Yes.
$3,000 in there. And that's why we don't do it. But we know that there's that difference that technically based on GAAP financial statements, it's supposed to be, but it's so, in the
Yeah.
grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. And since there is 12 months, we
Yes.
just put it in there
Mhm.
Okay, cool.
and just it carries forward. Every year it's approximately about that same amount.
Okay. So it's like an estimated accrual?
Yes,
It's an
in a way,
actual.
it's
an
an actual, it is actual.
It is an actual,
Yes.
so it is an actual amount. It's just that what it is that, okay, let's say I'm a citizen of Gladstone. I live right next door. I used water in June, but I don't get my bill until July.
Mhm.
And so what happened is the water consumption's already happened. So the water's already gone, but my revenue, like what I owe for last year, isn't in last year. It's in this year.
Yeah.
Because they didn't accrue it back. But they had 12 months of my bit, like I paid them for 12 months and that 12 months is in the current year.
Got
It's
it.
just that
Okay, it's
my-
not as simple
just
as
that
It's just
lag
a
on the
timing,
one
it's just
month.
a timing 1 month thing. So
Mhm.
it's like technically my June revenue that you guys should have got in June is just going in July.
Got it. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for explaining.
I know there's all these weird accounting things.
Yeah.
So hopefully we're explaining it okay to you guys.
No, it's
So-
wonderful. Yeah.
Somewhere near your mic went off too, but that's okay. I think it gets picked up.
Sorry, I'm loud usually.
What other questions do we have?
I don't.
How about anything particular for the urban renewal agency that's noteworthy?
It is very quiet this year with Urban Renewal Agency. Basically, we're collecting the revenues to pay the debt service on this building. And that is pretty much the only activity going on currently with Urban Renewal.
Okay.
Yes.
But they have positive as
positive
well.
cash,
So
yep.
it's like,
Mhm.
I was pulling them up really fast just to look at them, but it's like, there's not, the change in net position was positive. So on page 9 of the urban renewal financial statements, that number that I was talking about, the difference between the revenue and the expenses,
Mhm.
it's a positive number at 696,000. On the statement of net position, which is like the balance sheet, which is page 8, cash and cash equivalents, it's like, it's 2.8 million. It's positive.
Yeah.
We're pulling in enough money to pay our bills.
Yep. It's getting more revenue than
Yes.
you're spending.
Yes.
So
Love it.
yeah.
Yes.
I
We're
paid my
very
water bill
healthy.
today.
Doing your part.
Yeah, I did my part.
Yep.
Gasp.
Smaller question. I noticed in the AU letter, there was a restriction on use section. And I'm curious, like if I'm on the audit committee, obviously, but if I was a Gladstone citizen who is not on the audit committee, what level of detail would I have access to be aware of the city of Gladstone's records?
So the financial statements are public record. The AUC letter is public as well. It's just, we restrict the use on the AUC letter just because if there was any information in there that you had to have some sort of knowledge or background on, there's nothing in there that the piece that we just talked about with the unbilled revenue, like somebody doesn't have all that like background and knowledge. So let's say that that was something that was much bigger. Let's
Mhm.
say there was a material misstatement. Hypothetically, this is hypothetical for the record. Let's say that there was a material misstatement
Mhm.
of $1 million and then it just identifies that material misstatement in there. That's all the information that's in there. And so we restrict the use of it because we don't want somebody taking that information and not understanding the context behind it or being able to have those conversations around it. So that's why the restriction of use is on there.
That makes sense. I was really scratching my head on that one, so that makes sense.
But the financial statements, there's no restriction of use on the financial statements stuff. There might be a restriction of use on the, hold on, I want to look at this really quick because I can't remember off the top of my head.
Knowing that they're a public record, I think is
Oh,
good.
yes.
Yeah.
And if if any citizen or any person ever had any question about what makes up this public record,
Mhm.
it's incumbent upon us to be able to explain that and prove it more or less.
Awesome.
So you would explain it to somebody if somebody came to talk to you about something
Absolutely.
that they question.
Ad nauseum usually.
Why is the pothole in front of my house?
Yeah.
not part-
Yeah, it's just an accounting thing that we just restrict the use.
So I know you've already answered this, but before we vote, I'm going to ask you again. You don't have any concerns about the financials for the city of Gladstone or the Gladstone Urban Renewal Agency? Nothing to report.
No,
Okay.
if I
perfect.
did, I would let you know.
I understand. Just wanted to hear it on the record.
And,
Yeah,
and
thanks.
for the record, if we were doing the audit, so, we meet, once a year or whatever, or twice a year.
Mhm.
If we were doing the audit and we found something that we were worried about, we would bring it to your attention right away. Like we wouldn't wait until we would call a special meeting or we would contact you and the counselors as well if there was something like major. So just so that you guys know that if there was something like that, you would get notified sooner rather than later.
Thank you.
And Mr. Johnson, I appreciate that statement question because we have had issues historically. And we have brought in the proper professional help for the last 5 years. And so I think it's important that the public understands that we are doing a great job here in Gladstone and that a clean opinion is very rewarding for us to have.
Yeah.
A decade ago, things were pretty squirrely. And
Yes.
some of the questions have been asked tonight just didn't have answers at all.
Yes.
So, yeah, I appreciate where we are at. Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah, no concerns.
All right.
Awesome. Drew, do you have any questions?
No. I think I've asked anything. I understand a lot of things better.
Do we need to vote separately for the urban renewal district or sorry, URA? Or can we vote at the same time?
I believe we can vote at the same time, just specifically mention, both the City of Gladstone and the Gladstone Urban Renewal Agency. If you were having a differing opinion or, on one of the other entity, then you could do it separately. But if you're comfortable in approving the statements as presented, they can be combined and just mention both of them in the motion.
Perfect. All right. Well, I would entertain a motion to accept the audits for the City of Gladstone and the Urban Renewal Agency for fiscal year ended June 30th. 2022.
Perfect.
I second that.
You have to
Oh,
make a
no, I-
motion
Yeah,
first.
someone needs to make a motion. Would you make a
Oh.
motion?
I make let's see, but maybe sure we say it right. I make a motion that we accept the financial statements as written for what, 2022, for June 30th of 2022.
The
If you
motion
would-
probably needs to make a recommendation to the council.
You can actually read it
Yeah.
from the agenda
It's
verbatim.
Oh, cool.
You make a motion to recommend.
Recommend to the city council for acceptance of the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2022 annual financial statements for the city of Gladstone and the Gladstone Urban Renewal Agency.
Wow, good job.
Excellent.
Jackie,
I will
so whoever
second
wrote
that.
out for us.
I will
Thank
second
you.
that.
All right, we have a second. So let's vote.
No, any discussion.
Oh, do we have any further discussion?
Nothing further.
Haley, you can call for the roll call vote.
Drusilla Wyland,
Yes.
Sierra Cook,
Yes.
Steve Johnson.
Yes,
Motion carries.
there you go.
We have accepted the audit for year ending 2022.
Chair, under discussion, I'd like to add two very quick things when we can, if you want to do that before or after their update on finance.
Let's do it.
Okay,
Yes, we'd love to hear.
I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because it went pretty deep last year and there was a lot of words spoken, but I still stand by the fact that I think our IT department should be audited. A lot of strange things happened in this city in the last year or two. Documents showing up in funny places where they weren't expected. As an IT professional, I'm very concerned about the security of email. There are some big holes in Microsoft Exchange. Some of the controls for that really need to be enumerated and watched closely. I don't know where all that goes. I know that it was very busy last year. I know we've had a fundamental change in government, but I think that some of those things would still be beneficial if we had an audit firm take a look at the IT department and bring a report to the audit committee and then to the council. If not this year, maybe next year, this is a budget year, maybe we can make sure that that's in the budget someplace or a budget discussion this year. And I've got one more after that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure that that's within the scope of this committee. I think that the scope of the committee is really restricted to financial audits and financial statements. But I don't know. What do you think, Drew?
Well, I don't know what the problem is, so it's hard to,
An IT audit would be to make sure that the IT department is following the controls that have been put in place. Controls for security, controls for patches and fixes, controls for access, some of those types of things that are auditable activities. I know there is a written document that covers some of these things. And an
Well,
audit would.
do you feel that just normally that should happen, or do you feel that there's something wrong? Have you seen things?
I think there
that you
has
are
been
wrong?
something wrong. Again, with the change in government, maybe some of those problems have gone away. But I think it would be a good idea to know. And in the end, the auditor doesn't come out and say, you know, this is the password for these systems. It comes out and says the city is following its procedures and its controls when it comes to its IT department. And the data is safe. It's not wandering all over the place. The people that have access. We know that. It's a good idea, I think, to at least look at it once. It's never been looked at all.
Yeah.
I know that not everybody does it. You know, the audit committee, what we would be doing is we would be making that recommendation to the council and would be making a recommendation about whether to move forward on that. I don't think we'll do that tonight because we didn't get it on the agenda, but I think that if it were budgeted for someplace and if that discussion could happen next year, that would be good. But I think that a review would be a good idea.
I think it's a wonderful idea. I think it's definitely something that city council should make a decision on. And I don't know that it's within the scope of this committee to.
Would be to make a
Some-
recommendation to the city council to. proceed.
Sometimes things slip into, it just becomes too comfortable to just do things and you forget what's going on. And does that make sense? I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
you know,
get used to the status.
you
quo.
get used to doing things and
Mhm.
don't stop and think about the correct way to do them. So.
On a different note.
Yeah.
Okay,
got it.
but I'll give you very, very quick. Last year, and Marina and Company has done a good job, the best that I can tell, for a long time. But last year we talked about Marina and Company was moving out of this business. And we were going to talk about a new auditor. We were going to have a special meeting during the summer. That never happened that I'm aware of. What became of that and where are we with that issue?
I think that's part of our update on finance department work plan through June 30th, 2023.
Perfect. I'll leave it for that.
Yeah, some part of, and that's number one on the list of the work plan, is basically to issue a request for proposal for auditing services. And so at that time, before we actually send it out, I'll be happy to send you a draft of it, you know, if you would, for your review and input. regarding, there are very specific guidelines, just as everything with this work, there are very specific guidelines of what they need to do and what they, the qualifications that they must have, et cetera, that are dictated not only by the state, but by generally accepted accounting principles also. So I have a template of the auditor RFP. We'll be preparing that and then getting that out. Again, there is a lot of concern out there in the community right now. As far as from my side of it, there are not a lot of auditing firms that are qualified to do governmental audits. And because there has been, there's just been a lot of changes that AICPA has issued, a lot of different things that have created a headache for us. But yes, it's very much a shortage here. Certain states, like the state of Washington, has its own department of auditors within the state. They also contract with private auditing firms to do the work, but the audits are all controlled and run by the state of Washington. We don't have that here. We're all in competition with each other for the few firms that are available.
Is that a good idea?
For the state, for Washington, well, I worked there and for a city in Washington. I can tell you it was quite awesome, actually. It was very organized in that sense, but they all were administered under the same standards that we have here. It was just a more or less an organizing entity there for it.
But to answer your question, why you didn't know about this previously, we got a 1-year extension with Marina and Company
Mhm.
to do this work.
Yes.
And we're very grateful for that because we would have been scrambling probably to try to get this audit done. And we are concerned about the limited number of companies that may respond to our RFP, but that's the next project for us.
with that.
So Marina and Company is leaving the auditing world. That was what I think you said last year, wasn't it?
Yeah, so we are moving into 100% consulting for governments. So we're doing things like financial statement prep, audit prep. We're also doing organizational structure. We're doing different things that we feel are a little bit higher value than the audit. Not to say that the audit's bad, because I've been an auditor for my whole career. But we can actually help our clients instead of just identifying the problems. Like in the past, we had an entity where they had, I think, 4 pages of comments that were not getting taken care of. And every year it was getting longer. So then the next year it's 4.5 pages. So we can go in and help them get those things fixed because there's independence rules. We can't go in and help our audit clients. And so by pulling ourselves out of the auditing realm, then we can actually go and help the municipalities in Oregon and other states as well, because we practice in a couple different states. So,
Well, thank you for sticking around for another year.
yeah.
As far as this committee is concerned, what will our involvement look like in finding, like, in this process?
Basically, as I say, as far as reviewing the request for proposal, if you have any questions about it or feel there's a need to elaborate more on something, they are quite, it's a pretty straightforward guideline of what we will be looking for. But as far as your review, absolutely. And then once we receive proposals, hopefully we'll have some. If you would like to review the proposals, more than happy, at that point, we could call a meeting to review the proposals, even meet with the audit firm, have a face-to-face type introduction also too.
Have
So
we sent out proposals?
not
Yeah.
yet, not yet,
And we're hoping that this change will be made for
for next fiscal year,
next
for
fiscal
the
year.
the
Okay.
June 30th, 2023.
Yeah.
So the interim work would start theoretically sometime around August of 2023, and then the final field work would be towards the end of 2023. Again, statement preparation is done internally by myself, and then the auditors come in and verify the numbers.
When do you expect to start sending out the letters?
Soon, very soon.
Yeah,
Um,
and it's tough because we're also starting our biennium budget process. So internally, management and departments are gathering that information because the budget committee then will start meeting in a couple months for that. So we're trying to parallel that process. Yes.
Yes. So as Jackie said, that second on my list is basically the budget formulation for the 23-25 biennium. So that will be very intense for the next few months, but and then finally, the other thing that I would love to try and accomplish is get the annual comprehensive financial report structure in place that for possibly the 2023 statements, we're able to apply to GFOA for the Excellence in Financial Reporting Award. That is last on the list. It's the most glamorous thing that we can do. I would like to say, but it will have to be last on the list. So those are 3 very big projects coming up for this next year.
Doing that award program is very time consuming for the finance department. So just keep that in mind. Because there's 10 years worth of historical data that you have to have for the statistical section, which is a part that's required for the finance certificate of financial excellence. And so gathering that information, especially in the first year, takes quite a bit of time.
What are the benefits to the city of that award?
The Government Finance Officers Association of United States and Canada is the one who administers that program. And it's peer review within the agency. And then there's a very strict standards that we have on information that we have to include there. And it, with the preparation of it, it makes a statement to the bond rating agencies, the banks, the granting agencies, anybody who cares to look at it, that your annual financial reports are complete, they're accurate, and they give a very solid picture of the government.
So that could result in more favorable lending.
Yes, bond ratings,
Yeah,
it
bond
can help with
ratings.
that, interest rates on your borrowings, et cetera.
Those are typically the things that you see the most as a benefit. I mean, not just, personally, I'm a numbers nerd, go figure as an auditor. That my personal, I love the statistical section because it has 10 years worth of data. Because remember I said that I love the management discussion and analysis and that just has 2 years worth of information. Those have 10 years worth of information. I just feel like it's a good, a very solid snapshot of where the city is. So I personally like the ACFR, the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, because it has that additional information. But and so then the citizens have that information. And so it's really easy to see, like when you were asking about numbers, you can see, okay, has that been positive? Has it been negative? Where have we been? And then you have it all right there in one spot. So you can look at it, but that's just a personal nerd.
Oh,
Yeah,
I've
we
done-
we
yes.
both love it. So, but we are not claiming to not be nerds. So
So we should expect a meeting sometime in August. Is that correct? Did I understand that correctly?
No,
Well, no, we would have to do it prior to that time,
Okay.
Mr. Johnson, because what we will want to do is have a audit firm be able to start interim sometime in the early fall.
Okay, so you're looking for us to recommend to the council then?
you should need a recommendation.
Participation in the review of the audit firms of the proposals that come in.
Okay,
Yes,
all right.
yeah.
So
So
we'll-
July, June, I'm
Yeah,
just trying to
just
get a feel for it.
Watch our emails for communication from you,
Please,
Kathy.
if you
Okay.
would. I really it's going to be late spring.
Oh,
That is late spring.
oh, okay. All right. So before June 30th then?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yes, it has to be before June 30th. Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Any other discussion or finance updates, Kathy?
No, those are that will keep us busy.
I'm just suspicious of somebody that goes to Alaska in January. I'm not so sure about that.
Grandchildren.
Yeah, okay, all right. And
Grandchildren.
I had a driver's license in Alaska once.
Yeah.
January is not exactly
Oh, no,
vacation high season.
no, believe me, it's grandchildren.
Well, I would just like to say thank you to the three of you because as you know, we're recording this tonight and we have 4 new elected officials that are going to be watching this. And I think the questions that you asked will help them very much in understanding what their duties are as elected officials at the next meeting. So thank you for your thoughtful questions tonight.
Very much so.
And I would like to thank Jackie and Kathy and all of the finance team, as well as other individuals that our team was involved with, for making it a smooth process. I mean, we wouldn't have extended the opportunity to do another year extension had it not been smooth in the past, recent past. But they do a really good job of getting us the information when we ask. And so really, thank you.
Like I
Well
said,
said.
this is all a very big improvement over where it was a decade or so ago. So thank you to all of you.
Absolutely. Well said. Yes.
Thanks.
Well, I think that concludes our agenda. I would entertain a motion to conclude the meeting.
Make a motion to adjourn.
All right, let's have a vote.
Drusilla Wyland,
Oh, you get to vote on whether we adjourn or
Oh, yes.
not.
Sierra Cook,
Yes,
Steve Johnson.
Yes.
meeting adjourned.